Hey, let's talk about remote ID for drone pilots. This information is provided as of January 13th, 2021. So the new rules from the FAA come into effect 60 days after publishing to the Federal Register. As of today, they're expecting sometime between Friday and next week. But the reality is that there's a grace period from that 60 days of publishing and somewhere between 18 and 30 months, depending on whether you're a manufacturer or a pilot, to be fully compliant. So what's new? Well, the FAA's created Part 89. And so this is going to complement Part 107. And all the COAs are going to remain in effect, and they are currently working on the hobby rules. So Part 89 specifically has some areas that are going to help Part 107 drone pilots, including remote ID, recurrency training for 107 pilots, night operations, and flight over people or moving vehicles. Let's dive into what those actually mean. So remote ID is designed to help the FAA, law enforcement, and other federal agencies find the control station when a drone appears to be flying in an unsafe manner or where it's not allowed to fly. Remote ID lays the foundation for a lot more safety and security for more complex drone operations. And essentially, after the public comment for remote ID, one of the things that the FAA has created is they envision a public app to be on your phone or some kind of device that will pick up a broadcast, and that broadcast will only be viewed locally. So essentially within sight of the drone. And it will display the serial number, either an actual number or you can actually put in a session ID, which would be a randomly generated number from the FAA. They would know who you are, but the public would see a different aircraft, for instance, if you flew in the same spot from week to week. Think of it as a license plate for the public to report a drone to the FAA or law enforcement. And then the other app that's going to be developed is specifically for law enforcement and the FAA inspector. This app has not been developed yet, and it will show information such as the aircraft serial number, the altitude, the location, and either the control station location or the point of takeoff. So there's three options with remote ID. Option 1 is Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. It is not internet based, so you can be out in the middle of the desert or on a mountaintop with no cell phone or no internet connection at all, and it'll still work. It's intended to ID drones within sight, although some of the manufacturers are reporting several kilometers that they can get information of a drone. Expect many manufacturers to push a hardware update, firmware update for current aircraft to meet remote ID, and it's believed that it would be at zero cost to the drone owner for current aircraft. Obviously, they're not going to go back and retroactive for aircraft that are no longer on the production schedule. This information that's Bluetooth or Wi-Fi is going to be the drone ID, the location and altitude of the aircraft, the velocity, the control station location and its elevation, a time mark, and an emergency status if there is any on that drone, such as return to home or loss of link type of thing. Option number 2 for remote ID is going to be a small device attached to the aircraft that broadcasts Bluetooth or Wi-Fi based on the flight itself but you're not going to get the flight data from the aircraft itself. So this box is a self-sustaining box, and it's designed for aircraft that don't meet the ability to work under option 1. It's designed to be operated within line of sight, and they expect this to cost between $25 and $50. It would display the drone identification, the location and altitude and velocity. It would show the takeoff location, although if the pilot moved the control station, it would not know where the new location is, and some kind of a time stamp. The next way that you can do remote ID is to fly in what the FAA is calling the Recognized Identification Area, or FRIA. It's a community-based or educational facility or fixed site. You apply with an application to the FAA. No broadcast devices are required on the field. All aircraft must remain within line of sight of the pilot, and both the pilot and the aircraft must remain within that zone. And these facilities are going to be maintained, or they're valid for 48 months. So recurrency training, going forward, you're only going to have to take the 107 FAA exam in a testing center once, and then from then on, recurrency training, which is every 2 years, will move to an online training, no longer an exam, that will include all the 107 information, including night operations. Night operations is being melded into the regular 107 license, so everyone will be able to fly at night. There will be no cost for the recurrency training, and it'll be conducted online with one of the FAA's websites. Unfortunately, if your license expires between now and before the 60-day publishing, where the FAA has not yet created the recurrency training program, you're going to have to fall back to the old program and either retake the test at a testing center, which is going to cost money, or wait until the new rules are in effect to fly for the drone flight. Daylight waivers are going away. 120 days after the rule is published, all daylight waivers are going to expire. So they're actually going to change the date of the waiver. COAs remain in effect. There's going to be no new waivers expected to be needed. So you're going to need to complete the new 107 test with the new night requirements in it, or you will complete the online recurrency training is what they really want you to do. The 107 night flying is going to be incorporated into the new license and recurrency training. The requirements is to have a single or multiple anti-collision lights visible for 3 miles at a sufficient flash rate to avoid a collision. There's no VOs required, although if you have a COA, that may still require a VO. And it might take some time for the Lance with the night qualification to work in the system. Those are not quite compatible yet. For flight over people, it's based on risk in 4 categories. Category 1 is flight over people permitted if your aircraft is less than 0.55 pounds and there's no exposed rotating parts that would cause lacerations. For an example, a Mavic Mini is 0.54 pounds, but with the prop guards, it's not going to meet this category. Category 2, flight over people is permitted under Category 2 with remote ID if not more than 11 foot-pounds of kinetic energy and there's no exposed rotating parts that would cause lacerations. So, quick calculation, the Mavic Mini at 20 feet would create 11 kinetic pounds of force. A Mavic 2 could do the same kinetic force at 5.5 feet. So this is going to create an opportunity for manufacturers to create some new products that would meet this, or the parachute system, or something else like that. Category 3, flight over people is limited. Cannot fly over open air assemblies unless there is a closed or restricted access site with notice to people. So maybe in a stadium, the back of a ticket, or you would put up some signs that say, hey, we're going to be flying drones overhead. You're not allowed sustained flight overhead unless the people are participating directly in the operation. They're located under a covered structure or inside of a vehicle. Now this criteria is going to be no more than 25 foot-pounds of kinetic energy and no exposed rotating parts that would cause lacerations. So get used to flying with your prop guards on. A Mavic Mini could fly at 45 feet and a Mavic 2 at 12 feet. Category 4 is flight over people is permitted with an airworthiness certificate. So we expect certain manufacturers to create aircraft that would meet a requirement, and as long as the manual doesn't prohibit flight over people, then those aircraft would be allowed. Operations over moving vehicles allows you to fly over moving cars or boats and those sorts of things. Category 1, 2, or 3, and it's either a closed or restricted site with notice to those people that might be involved, or it doesn't maintain sustained flight. So now you could actually transition over a road with vehicles on it because we're not sustaining flight. It's incidental to the flight. And of course, the Category 4, as long as the flight manual does not prohibit that. Well, I hope you learned something there, and let's go fly.